This is HOA Justice Stories. The tow driver hesitated, and she screamed louder. I pulled into my driveway after a long shift at the county clerk office, and before I even killed the engine, a middle-aged white woman in a black windbreaker was already standing at my driver door, with a piece of chalk in one hand and a clipboard in the other. "You are not allowed to do that in this HOA," she screamed, jabbing her finger at the fresh white mark she had just drawn on my front tire. "The clock started an hour ago, and your car is already marked for removal." I sat there for a second, keys still in the ignition, trying to process what I was hearing. "An hour ago I was not even here. I was at work." She tapped the chalk mark again, harder this time, like she was hammering a nail. "Does not matter," she said. "The violation occurred when you left it parked in a fire lane overnight. This is your final courtesy notice before we tow." I climbed out of my Civic and looked at the curb. There was no red paint. There was no fire hydrant. There was no sign. My driveway apron met the street in a perfectly ordinary residential zone, and I had been parking here every single day for 6 months without a single issue. I pointed at the curb. "This is not a fire lane." She smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting for this moment. "It is now," she said. "The board reinterpreted the covenant last week. Any driveway that extends more than 6 inches past the property line is considered an encroachment into the fire access corridor. Your front tires cross that threshold every time you park." I glanced down. My tires were barely over the edge of my concrete pad, maybe 8 inches into the street. That is how driveways work. That is how every driveway in this neighborhood works. I work as a county clerk employee, which means I spend 40 hours a week dealing with public records requests, land documents, and HOA covenant filings. I know exactly how fire lane designations work, and I know they require posted signage and curb markings under Florida statute. I told her that. She waved the clipboard in my face. "We do not need signs for internal enforcement," she said. "This is a private community. The Landing at Harborview Design Review Association has full authority to manage parking compliance within the property boundaries, and your vehicle is in violation as of this morning." I felt my jaw tighten. "As of this morning. That is interesting, because you just said the board reinterpreted the rule last week. So which is it?" She did not answer. Instead, she pulled out her phone and snapped a photo of my front tire, then another photo of my license plate. "I have all day, and so does my fine meter," she said. That was when I noticed the reflective triangle markers sitting on the pavement near my rear wheel, like the kind you use for roadside emergencies. I had not put it there. She must have set it down while I was still in the car, staging the scene to look like I was blocking something. I pointed at it. "What is that for?" She glanced at it, then back at me. "Safety documentation," she said. "In case the tow operator needs a reference point." I bent down and picked it up. It was brand new, still had the plastic tag hanging off one corner. "You just put this here." She crossed her arms. "Prove it." I stood there holding the triangle, and I realized this was not a misunderstanding or a mistake. This was targeted. This was planned. And she was enjoying it. Her name was Martha Johnson, and she was the Welcome Committee Chair for the Landing at Harborview, which meant she was supposed to help new residents settle in and hand out neighborhood directories. Instead, she spent her time weaponizing move-in rules and inventing violations for anyone who did not kiss the ring. I had heard stories from other neighbors about surprise inspections, bogus fines, and middle-of-the-night door knocks over things like trash can placement or unapproved holiday decorations. I had managed to avoid her for 6 months by keeping my head down and following every rule in the handbook. But now she was standing in my driveway with a stack of pre-filled violation forms, and I could see that every single box was already checked. Name, address, violation code, fine amount, tow authorization, all of it filled out in advance. She had been planning this before she even walked over. I asked to see the rule she was citing. She flipped to a page in her binder and held it up, but she did not let me touch it. "Right there," she said, pointing at a paragraph buried in the middle of a dense block of text. "Encroachment into fire access corridors is prohibited and subject to immediate enforcement action, including towing at owner expense." I leaned in to read it. The paragraph did not say anything about driveways. It was talking about temporary structures like dumpsters and moving trucks. I told her that. She snapped the binder shut. "You are not a lawyer," she said. "I am the enforcement liaison, and I am telling you, this is a violation. If you want to dispute it, you can file an appeal with the board, but the tow company does not wait for appeals. We can tow first and explain later. That is how enforcement works." That line, "we can tow first and explain later, that is how enforcement works," stuck in my head like a splinter. I did not say anything right away, because I wanted her to keep talking. I wanted her to repeat the story. I wanted her on record saying that this was standard procedure, that the board had the authority, that the rule was clear. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice memo app. "Do you mind if I record this conversation?" I asked. "For my records." She stiffened. "You do not have my consent." I shrugged. Florida is a two-party consent state for private conversations, but we are standing in my driveway and you are acting in an official capacity as an HOA representative. I am allowed to document enforcement actions. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to decide whether to escalate or retreat. She chose escalate. "Fine," she said. "Record whatever you want. It will not change the outcome." She turned and walked toward the street, pulling out her own phone. I watched her dial, and a few seconds later I heard her say, "Yeah, it is Martha. I need a pickup at 4782 Sandpiper Lane. Immediate removal. Fire lane violation. Owner refused to comply." She paused, listening. "No. Do not wait. He is standing right here arguing, and I do not have time for this. Just send the truck." She hung up and looked back at me. "You have 15 minutes to move your car off the property, or it gets towed. And if you move it into the guest parking lot without a valid permit, that is another violation." I felt my pulse kick up. The guest parking lot required a permit that took 72 hours to process, and the application had to be submitted in person at the management office, which was only open from 9 to noon on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Today was Friday. There was no way to get a permit before Monday, which meant I had nowhere to park except my own driveway, which she was now claiming was illegal. I told her that. She smiled again. "Sounds like a personal problem." I wanted to grab her clipboard and throw it into the street, but instead I pulled out my own phone and opened the county property appraiser website. I pulled up the plat map for my address and zoomed in on the property line. According to the survey, my driveway ended exactly at the edge of my lot, and the apron transitioned into the public right-of-way, which is managed by the city, not the HOA. I turned the screen toward her. "This is not HOA property. The HOA does not have jurisdiction over the public right-of-way." She did not even look at the screen. "The covenant supersedes city jurisdiction within the community," she said. "Every homeowner signed the Declaration of Covenants when they purchased, which means you agreed to abide by our rules." I did sign the covenants, but I also read them, and there was nothing in there about fire lanes or driveway measurements. I told her I wanted a copy of the revised rule she kept referencing. She shook her head. "Revised rules are distributed at the annual meeting. If you missed it, that is on you." The annual meeting had been 2 months ago, on a Wednesday afternoon at 1 o'clock, right in the middle of my work shift. I had requested the meeting minutes 3 times through the management company, and I never got a response. I told her that. She shrugged. "Not my problem. The rule is in effect. and you are in violation." I checked my watch. 10 minutes had passed since she made the call. That meant I had 5 minutes before the tow truck showed up, assuming she was telling the truth. I did not know if she was bluffing or if she actually had a tow company on speed dial, but I was not about to risk it. I climbed back into my car and started the engine. "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked. She pointed at the street. "Public parking is 2 blocks away, past the gatehouse. You can walk back." I looked down the street. 2 blocks in Jacksonville heat, in my work clothes, carrying my laptop bag and a week's worth of case files. And then what? I come back tomorrow and do this all over again? She did not answer. She just stood there with her clipboard, watching me back out of my driveway. I pulled onto the street and drove toward the gatehouse, my hands shaking on the wheel. I passed 3 other houses with cars parked in their driveways. Tires over the apron edge, no chalk marks, no violations. I passed the neighborhood pool, where a white pickup truck was parked half on the curb, completely blocking the sidewalk. No violation. I passed the clubhouse, where 2 sedans were parked in the fire lane, actual red curb, right next to a hydrant. No chalk marks. I pulled into the public parking area, which was a gravel lot behind the tennis courts, and I sat there for a minute trying to figure out what just happened. My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Your vehicle has been documented for improper parking in a fire access corridor. A fine of $250 has been assessed to your account. Failure to pay within 10 days will result in a lien against your property." I screenshotted the text and saved it to a folder I had started calling HOA evidence. Then I opened my email and started drafting a formal records request to the management company. I needed the revised fire lane rule, the board meeting minutes from the last 6 months, the towing contract, and the enforcement policy. I needed everything in writing, because Martha was playing fast and loose with the facts, and I was not going to let her steamroll me with fake rules and intimidation. I hit send and checked my watch again. It was almost 6. I had to be back at work at 8 the next morning, which gave me about 12 hours to figure out how to park my car without getting towed, fined, or harassed. I grabbed my laptop bag and started walking back toward my house. The wind was picking up, rattling the chain link fence around the tennis courts and whipping loose papers across the parking lot. I passed the gatehouse where the security guard was sitting in his booth scrolling his phone, completely ignoring the fact that I was walking in on foot like a visitor instead of a resident. I waved at him. He did not wave back. By the time I got back to my street, the sun was starting to drop behind the roofline, and the porch lights were coming on in long yellow rows. My driveway was empty. No Martha. No clipboard. No chalk. I walked up to my front door and checked the handle. Unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped inside, half expecting to find another violation notice taped to my kitchen counter, but the house was quiet. I dropped my bag on the couch and went to the window. From there, I had a clear view of the street, and I could see my neighbor 2 doors down, a guy named Eric, standing in his driveway washing his truck. His tires were over the apron edge by at least a foot. No chalk. No Martha. I watched him for a minute, and then I grabbed my phone and walked outside. Eric looked up when he saw me coming. "Hey, man," he said. "You good? You look stressed." I told him what happened. The chalk mark, the fire lane claim, the tow threat, the 15-minute countdown. He set down the hose and shook his head. "Yeah, she tried that on me last month," he said. "Came by at like 6 in the morning with a tape measure and a camera, told me my truck was parked illegally because the bumper was past the property line. I told her to kick rocks. Did she follow through?" I asked. He laughed. "Nah. She sent me a violation notice, but I just ignored it. The management company never backed her up. They know she is full of it." I felt a tiny bit of relief, but it did not last long. If the management company was not backing her up, then how was she authorizing tow trucks? Eric must have seen the question on my face, because he leaned in and lowered his voice. "Word is, she has a side deal with a tow company," he said. "They give her a cut of every tow, so she is out here inventing violations to hit her quota." I do not know if it is true, but I have seen the same tow truck circle the neighborhood like 4 times in the last 2 weeks, and it is always right after she does her little enforcement walk. That made sense, and it made me angrier. If Martha was running a towing scam, then every violation she wrote was fraudulent and every fine she collected was theft. I asked Eric if he had any proof. He shook his head. "Just neighborhood gossip," he said. "But if you want to dig into it, you should talk to Claire. She lives over on Pelican Court, and she caught Martha on her doorbell camera one night like 2 in the morning, walking around her property with a flashlight. Claire filed a police report, but nothing came of it." I thanked him and walked back to my house. The wind was really picking up now, rattling the loose chain on a neighbor's flagpole and knocking over a recycling bin 2 houses down. I went inside, opened my laptop, and started building a timeline. Every interaction with Martha, every violation notice, every fine, every weird rule interpretation. I pulled up the HOA covenant document and searched for the word fire. It appeared twice, both times in reference to fire safety equipment like extinguishers and smoke detectors. Nothing about fire lanes. Nothing about driveways. Nothing about encroachment. I searched for driveway. It appeared once, in a section about construction permits. Nothing about parking. Nothing about apron measurements. I was halfway through drafting an email to the board president when my phone buzzed again. Another text from the same unknown number. "This is your second notice. Your vehicle remains in violation. A tow authorization has been issued. If your vehicle is found parked in a restricted zone, it will be removed immediately at owner expense." I looked at the timestamp. It had been sent 4 minutes ago. I was not parked in a restricted zone. I was parked in the public lot, exactly where Martha had told me to go. I texted back. "What restricted zone? My car is in the public parking area." No response. I waited 5 minutes, then 10. Nothing. I grabbed my keys and jogged back to the parking lot. My car was still there, untouched, but there was a new detail I had not noticed before. A small orange sticker on the driver's side window. I leaned in and read it. "Unauthorized vehicle. This parking area is reserved for guests and recreational facility users. Vehicles parked overnight without a valid permit will be towed at owner expense." The sticker was dated today, time-stamped at 6:14 p.m., which was about 20 minutes ago. I had been inside talking to Eric when someone came by and slapped it on. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of the sticker. Then another photo of the parking lot sign which said public parking. No mention of permits or time limits. Then I called the non-emergency police line and asked if I could get an officer to document the situation. The dispatcher asked if there was an immediate threat. I said no. She said they would send someone when available, but it might be a few hours. I thanked her and hung up. A few hours was not good enough. If Martha had already authorized a tow, the truck could show up any minute. I needed to move the car again, but I had nowhere to go. I could not park in my driveway. I could not park in the guest lot without a permit. I could not park on the street because the HOA had a blanket ban on street parking after 6 p.m. The only option left was to leave the neighborhood entirely and park somewhere off-site, which would mean walking back and forth every time I needed my car, or just driving it to work and leaving it in the county lot overnight. Neither option was sustainable. Neither option was fair. I sat in the car and checked my email. The management company had replied to my records request. "We are in receipt of your inquiry." Please allow 5 to 7 business days for document retrieval and processing. A records fee of 50 cents per page will apply. I did the math. If the meeting minutes were 30 pages, and the covenant revisions were another 20, and the towing contract was 10, I was looking at a $30 bill just to see the rules I was supposedly violating. And 5 to 7 business days meant I would not have the documents until the middle of next week, which was plenty of time for Martha to tow me 3 more times and rack up hundreds of dollars in fines and impound fees. I needed a faster solution. I opened the county clerk database and ran a search for the landing at Harborview Design Review Association. The results came back in 2 seconds. Incorporation documents, annual reports, covenant filings, board rosters, management contracts. I clicked on the management contract and skimmed the PDF. The contract was dated 3 years ago, and the term was for 2 years with an automatic renewal clause. I checked the renewal date. It had expired 4 months ago. I scrolled down to the signature page. No renewal signature. No addendum. The contract was dead. That was the trump card. If the management company was not under contract, then they had no legal authority to enforce HOA rules, collect fines, authorize towing, or issue violations. Every action they had taken in the last 4 months was void. Every fine was invalid. Every tow authorization was fraudulent, and Martha had been operating under the assumption that no one would bother to check. I saved the PDF and added it to my evidence folder. I did not mention it to anyone yet, because I wanted her to keep digging. I wanted her to repeat the story again, on record in front of witnesses. I wanted her to authorize another tow, issue another fine, send another threatening text. Because when I finally pulled out that expired contract, it was going to blow up her entire enforcement scheme, and there would be nothing she could do to walk it back. I drove out of the neighborhood and parked at a 24-hour grocery store 3 miles away. I left the car in the back corner of the lot under a streetlight, and I walked back to the bus stop. The next bus was not due for 40 minutes, so I sat on the bench and opened my email again. The board president, a retired guy named Bill, had finally replied to the message I sent 2 weeks ago asking about the fire lane rule. His response was short. Martha handles enforcement. Reach out to her directly. I replied immediately. I did reach out to her. She threatened to tow my car from my own driveway and fined me $250 for parking in a fire lane that does not exist. I need clarification on this rule, and I need it in writing. I hit send and checked the time. It was almost 8. The wind was still gusting, and a light rain was starting to fall, rattling the bus stop roof and soaking the edge of the bench. I pulled my hood up and leaned back, watching the headlights slide past on the main road. If you are enjoying this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more HOA chaos and neighborhood drama. The bus finally showed up at 8:47, and I climbed on, paid the fare, and took a seat near the back. The driver gave me a look, like he was wondering why someone in a polo shirt and work pants was riding the bus at night instead of driving, but he did not say anything. I got off at the stop closest to my neighborhood and walked the rest of the way in the rain. By the time I got back to my house, I was soaked, my shoes were squishing, and I was ready to call a lawyer. But lawyers cost money, and I was already staring down a $250 fine plus whatever the tow fees would be if Martha made good on her threat. I needed to solve this myself, and I needed to do it fast. I changed into dry clothes, made a pot of coffee, and sat down at my kitchen table with a notebook. I started mapping out a plan. Step 1. Gather evidence. Step 2. File a formal complaint with the board. Step 3. If the board did nothing, file a complaint with the county. Step 4. If the county did nothing, file in small claims court and request a hearing. Step 5. Show up at the hearing with the expired management contract and watch the whole thing collapse. The rain picked up, hammering the roof and rattling the windows. I checked my phone. Another text from the unknown number. Final warning. Your vehicle has been located in an unauthorized area. A tow truck has been dispatched. Removal is imminent. I looked at the timestamp. 9:52 p.m. I had parked at the grocery store almost 2 hours ago. There was no way Martha knew where my car was, unless she had been following me, or unless the tow company was actively searching for my vehicle like a repo crew. I grabbed my keys and ran back outside. The rain was coming down in sheets now, and the wind was strong enough to knock over a patio chair on my neighbor's deck. I sprinted to the bus stop, but the next bus was not due for another hour. I called an Uber. The driver showed up 10 minutes later, and I gave him the address of the grocery store. He looked at me in the rearview mirror. "You okay, man? You look like you are about to fight someone." I did not answer. I just stared out the window and watched the rain blur the streetlights into long yellow streaks. We pulled into the grocery store lot, and I saw the tow truck immediately. It was backed up to my car, wheel lift already under the rear axle, amber lights flashing. A guy in a reflective vest was standing beside the truck, adjusting the chains. I jumped out of the Uber and ran across the lot, yelling for him to stop. He looked up, startled, and held up one hand. "Whoa, calm down. I am just doing my job." I stopped a few feet away, breathing hard. "That is my car. You cannot tow it." He shrugged. "I got a work order. Unauthorized parking. Owner notified. Removal authorized." I pulled out my phone and showed him the text I had received. "This says imminent, not authorized. Who gave you the work order?" He tapped a clipboard hanging on the side of the truck. "The HOA." I leaned in and looked at the paperwork. It was a generic tow authorization form with my plate number, the grocery store address, and a signature at the bottom. The signature was illegible, but the name printed underneath said Martha Johnson. I pointed at it. "She does not have the authority to authorize a tow from private property outside the HOA. This is not HOA property. This is a grocery store." The driver scratched his head. "Look, man, I do not know the details. I just get a call, I show up, I tow the car. If you have a problem with the authorization, you need to take it up with whoever signed the order. I am not getting in the middle of it." I asked him to call his boss. He hesitated, then pulled out his phone and dialed. A few seconds later, he put it on speaker. A gruff voice answered. "Yeah." The driver explained the situation. "There is a guy here saying the car is his and the tow is not authorized." The voice on the other end sighed. "Did he get a notification?" The driver looked at me. I held up my phone. He nodded into the phone. "Yeah, he got a text." The voice on the other end said, "Then it is authorized. Load it up." I stepped closer to the phone. "No, it is not authorized. The person who signed the work order is not the property owner, and this is not HOA property. You are towing a vehicle from a private business parking lot without the business owner's consent, which is illegal under Florida statute." There was a long pause. Then the voice said, "Who are you?" I told him my name. He asked if I was a lawyer. I said no, but I work for the county clerk and I know how towing laws work. Another pause. Then he said, "Hold on." The driver lowered the wheel lift and stepped back. I could hear muffled conversation on the other end of the line, and then a new voice came on. "This is the manager. What is the issue?" I explained the whole thing. The fire lane claim, the expired contract, the fake violation, the unauthorized tow. The manager listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he said, "Do you have proof the contract is expired?" I pulled up the PDF on my phone and read him the expiration date. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "We are going to pull the truck. If the HOA wants to dispute it, they can take it up with us directly, but we are not towing a vehicle without clear legal authority." "Thank you," I said. The line went dead. The driver looked at me, then at the truck, then back at me. "You are lucky," he said. "My boss does not usually back down like that." I did not feel lucky. I felt exhausted. The rain was still coming down, and my clothes were soaked again. The driver climbed into the truck, pulled the wheel lift out from under my car, and drove away. I stood there in the parking lot watching the taillights disappear into the rain, and I realized this was not over. Martha was going to escalate. She was going to push harder. And I was going to have to push back even harder. I climbed into my car and sat there for a minute, dripping water all over the seat. My phone buzzed. A text from Eric. "Hey man, just saw your post in the neighborhood group chat. A bunch of us are meeting tomorrow morning at the clubhouse to talk about Martha and the towing thing. You should come." I had not posted anything in the group chat, which meant someone else had, probably Claire or one of the other neighbors who had dealt with Martha's enforcement stunts. I texted back, "What time?" He replied immediately, 9 a.m. Bring any paperwork you have. We are going to file a group complaint with the board. I set an alarm for 7 and drove back to the grocery store. I parked in a different spot, closer to the entrance, under a brighter light. Then I walked inside, bought a cheap umbrella and a bottled water, and sat in the seating area near the front windows where I could keep an eye on my car. I opened my laptop and started drafting a formal complaint. I listed every violation Martha had issued, every threat she had made, every inconsistency in her story. I attached the expired management contract, the text messages, the photos of the chalk mark in the orange sticker, and the screenshot of the property line map. By the time I finished, it was almost midnight. I sent the complaint to the board president, the board secretary, and the management company, all in one email. Then I closed the laptop and tried to get some sleep in the car. I woke up at 6 with a stiff neck and a headache. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still gray and heavy. I grabbed a coffee from the grocery store and drove back to the neighborhood. The gatehouse guard waved me through without looking up. I parked on the street 3 blocks from my house, which was technically illegal after 6 p.m. but not yet enforced in the morning, and I walked the rest of the way. When I got to the clubhouse at 9, there were already a dozen people inside, sitting around a folding table with papers and laptops spread out. Claire was there, a woman in her 50s with short brown hair and a no-nonsense expression. Eric was there. So was a younger guy named Jason who lived on Heron Drive, and an older couple named the Mitchells who had been dealing with Martha for over a year. Claire waved me over. "We have been comparing notes," she said. "Martha has hit almost everyone in this room with at least one bogus violation in the last 6 months. Eric got the driveway thing. Jason got a fine for parking his motorcycle in his own garage because she said it was a commercial vehicle. The Mitchells got cited for having a vegetable garden in their backyard because she claimed it violated the landscaping covenant. And I got a notice for having my trash can visible from the street, even though every single house on my block has the same setup." Jason pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. "I filed a public records request with the county and got the original covenant document," he said. "None of these rules exist. The fire lane thing, the driveway measurements, the commercial vehicle ban, none of it. Martha is making it up as she goes." I opened the folder and flipped through the pages. He was right. The original covenant was a straightforward document about exterior paint colors, fence heights, and noise ordinances. There was nothing about parking enforcement, nothing about fire lanes, nothing about commercial vehicles. I pulled out my own packet and showed them the expired management contract. The room went silent. Claire leaned in and read the expiration date. Are you serious? I nodded. The contract expired 4 months ago, and there is no renewal on file. Which means every fine they have issued since then is void, and every tow they have authorized is illegal. Eric whistled. That is huge. We need to bring this to the board. The Mitchells looked at each other. The board is not going to do anything, Mr. Mitchell said. Bill is too scared of Martha. She runs the Welcome Committee, the Enforcement Committee, and the Landscape Committee. She basically is the board at this point. Claire tapped the table. We do not need the board, she said. We need a lawyer. If we can prove the management contract is expired and Martha has been issuing fines under false authority, we can file a class action and get every fine refunded, plus damages. That is going to cost money, Jason said. Claire nodded. We can pool resources. If everyone in this room chips in, we can hire someone for a consultation at least. I looked around the table. 12 people, all of them dealing with the same harassment, all of them ready to fight back. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice memo app. Before we do anything, I said, we need to get Martha on record one more time. We need her to repeat the claim that she has the authority to enforce these rules, and we need it on video. Eric grinned. You want to bait her? I nodded. I want to give her enough rope to hang herself. Claire leaned back and crossed her arms. How do you want to do it? I thought for a second. I am going to park in my driveway tonight and wait for her to show up, I said. And when she does, I am going to ask her to explain the rule again, on camera, and I am going to ask her to show me the management contract. If she refuses, that is evidence. If she lies, that is evidence. If she threatens to tow me, that is evidence. And when I pull out the expired contract, we are going to have everything we need to shut this down. Jason nodded slowly. That is risky. If she calls the tow truck again, you might not be able to stop it this time. I shrugged. Then we document the tow, file a police report, and add it to the lawsuit. Either way, we win. The Mitchells looked worried, but Claire was smiling. I like it, she said. But you are not doing this alone. I am going to be there with my camera, and Eric is going to be there as a witness. We are going to make sure she does not try to twist the story later. I agreed. We set the plan for that evening, 7 p.m., right when Martha usually did her enforcement rounds. Everyone exchanged phone numbers, and we agreed to keep the group chat updated in real time. Then, we packed up the papers and left. I walked back to my car, and for the first time in 2 days, I felt like I had some control. I was not just reacting anymore. I was setting the trap. I spent the rest of the day at work, but I could not focus. Every time my phone buzzed, I expected another text from the unknown number, another tow threat, another violation notice. But nothing came. The silence was worse than the harassment, because it meant Martha was planning something. I left work at 5 and drove straight home. I parked in my driveway, tires over the apron edge, exactly the way I always parked. Then I went inside and changed into clean clothes, made sure my phone was fully charged, and set up a small tripod on my porch with my phone mounted on it, recording the driveway. Claire showed up at 6:45 with a professional camera and a long lens. Eric showed up a few minutes later and parked across the street. We did not talk. We just waited. Martha showed up at 7011. She came walking down the sidewalk with her clipboard and her phone, and she stopped at the edge of my driveway. She looked at my car, then at me, then at Claire with her camera. She did not say anything right away. I stepped forward. "Evening, Martha," I said. "Can I help you with something?" She tapped her clipboard. "Your vehicle is parked in a fire lane. This is your 3rd violation. I am authorizing immediate removal." I pulled out my phone and opened the voice memo app. "I am recording this conversation," I said. For the record, can you explain which rule I am violating? She stiffened. You know which rule. I nodded. I do know, but I want to hear you explain it. For the record. She glanced at Claire, then back at me. The landing at Harborview Design Review Association Fire Access Corridor Policy prohibits any vehicle from encroaching into the designated fire lane zone, which includes any portion of the driveway apron that extends past the property line by more than 6 inches. Your vehicle is in violation. I nodded again. And who authorized this policy? She hesitated. The board. When? She did not answer. I pressed. When did the board authorize this policy? Was it at the annual meeting? Was it at a special session? Was it in a written amendment to the covenant? She crossed her arms. That is not your concern. The rule is in effect, and you are in violation. I have all day, and so does my fine meter. There it was, the same line she had used 2 days ago. I glanced at Claire. She gave me a tiny nod. She had it on camera. I looked back at Martha. Can you show me the management contract that gives you the authority to enforce this rule? She blinked. What? The management contract, I said. The one between the HOA and the management company. I would like to see the section that grants you enforcement authority. She shook her head. I do not have to show you anything. Yes, you do, I said. Under Florida Statute 720, homeowners have the right to inspect HOA contracts and financial records. I am requesting a copy of the current management contract. She pulled out her phone. I am calling the tow company, she said. I held up my hand. Before you do that, I have something you should see. I pulled out a printed copy of the expired management contract and handed it to her. She looked at it, and I watched her face change. The expiration date is right there, I said. 4 months ago. No renewal, no addendum. Which means you do not have the authority to enforce anything. Every fine you have issued is void. Every tow you have authorized is illegal. And if you call that tow truck right now, you are going to be personally liable for wrongful removal. Martha stared at the document, and for the first time since I met her, she looked rattled. She flipped through the pages, looking for something, anything that would give her an out. But there was nothing. The contract was dead, and she knew it. She looked up at me, then at Claire, then at Eric across the street. This is not over, she said. I smiled. Actually, it is. I am filing a formal complaint with the board tomorrow, and I am requesting a full audit of every fine and violation you have issued in the last 6 months. If you want to fight it, go ahead, but you are going to lose. She turned and walked away, fast, almost running. Claire lowered her camera. Did you get it? She asked. I nodded. Every word. Eric jogged across the street. That was beautiful, he said. What happens now? I pulled out my phone and opened the group chat. Now we file, I said. The next morning I drafted a formal appeal and submitted it to the board with copies of everything. The expired contract, the text messages, the photos, the voice recordings, the video from Claire's camera. I requested an immediate hearing and asked that the appeal be entered into the official meeting minutes. The board president replied within an hour. We will schedule a hearing for next Tuesday at 7 p.m. All parties will have an opportunity to present evidence. I forwarded the email to the group chat, and within minutes, half the neighborhood had confirmed they were coming. This was not just about me anymore. This was about everyone who had been harassed, fined, and intimidated by Martha and her fake enforcement scheme. This was about taking back control of the neighborhood. Tuesday came fast. I spent the weekend organizing my evidence into a clean timeline packet with dates, receipts, permit confirmations, and photos. I printed copies for every board member and a few extras for witnesses. Claire and Eric prepared their own statements, and Jason brought a stack of similar violations from other neighbors. We all met at the clubhouse at 6:45, and by the time the meeting started at 7, the room was packed. Bill, the board president, sat at the front table with 2 other board members, both of them looking uncomfortable. Martha was sitting off to the side, arms crossed, glaring at me. Bill cleared his throat. "We are here to review an appeal filed by the homeowner at 4782 Sandpiper Lane regarding parking enforcement and alleged violations. The appellant will present his case first, followed by the enforcement liaison. Then the board will deliberate and issue a decision." He nodded at me. "You may begin." I stood up and walked to the front. I did not have notes. I did not need them. I had been living this nightmare for a week, and every detail was burned into my brain. I started with the timeline. The chalk mark, the fire lane claim, the 15-minute countdown, the tow threats, the orange sticker, the grocery store incident. I showed the text messages on a projector screen, read the exact words Martha had used, and played the audio recording of her saying, "We can tow first and explain later. That is how enforcement works." The room was silent. Then I pulled up the expired management contract and displayed the expiration date on the screen. "This contract expired 4 months ago," I said. "There is no renewal on file with the county, which means the management company has no legal authority to collect fines, issue violations, or authorize towing. Every action taken under this contract is void." I paused and looked at Martha. "And every fine issued in the last 4 months is fraudulent." Bill shifted in his seat. "Do you have proof that the contract was not renewed internally?" I nodded. "I submitted a public records request to the management company, and they confirmed in writing that no renewal was executed. I have the email here." I pulled it up on the screen. Bill read it, and I could see his jaw tighten. He looked at Martha. "Is this true?" Martha stood up. "The contract renewal was an administrative oversight," she said. "It does not invalidate the enforcement actions. We have always operated under the assumption that the contract was in effect." I stepped forward. "An assumption is not a legal basis for enforcement," I said. "And more importantly, the rule you have been citing does not exist." I pulled up the original covenant document and searched for the word fire. It appears twice, both in reference to fire safety equipment. There is no mention of fire lanes, driveway measurements, or encroachment. "You made it up." Martha's face flushed red. "I did not make it up. The board approved a revised interpretation at the executive session." I looked at Bill. "Was there an executive session?" Bill shook his head. "No. There was no executive session." The room erupted. Neighbors started shouting questions, demanding answers, waving their own violation notices in the air. Bill banged a gavel on the table. "Order. Please. We need to maintain order." He looked at Martha. "You are going to need to explain yourself." Martha stood there, frozen, and I could see her trying to figure out an exit strategy. But there was none. The evidence was overwhelming. The contract was expired. The rule did not exist. The fines were fraudulent. And she had been caught on camera threatening illegal towing. Bill turned to the other board members. "I move that we suspend all enforcement actions pending a full audit of the management company relationship and a review of all fines issued in the last 6 months." The other 2 board members nodded. The motion passed. Bill looked at me. "Your appeal is granted. All fines issued against your property are voided, and the HOA will reimburse your filing fees to end this dispute." I felt a wave of relief so strong I almost sat down right there. But I stayed standing. "What about Martha?" I asked. Bill hesitated, then looked at her. "Effective immediately, Martha Johnson is removed from her role as enforcement liaison and welcome committee chair pending further investigation." The room erupted again, this time in applause. Martha stood up, grabbed her clipboard, and walked out without another word. The meeting wrapped up 20 minutes later. Claire came over and hugged me. "You did it," she said. "We did it," I corrected. Eric clapped me on the back. "That was the most satisfying thing I have ever seen," he said. Jason grinned. "She is done. She is never going to recover from this." I nodded, but I was not celebrating yet. I wanted to make sure the board followed through. I wanted to see the audit results. I wanted to see the refunds. I wanted to see Martha's resignation letter in writing. And most importantly, I wanted to make sure no one else in this neighborhood ever had to deal with this kind of harassment again. Over the next week, the board hired an independent auditor to review the management company relationship. The auditor confirmed that the contract had expired, that no renewal was executed, and that over 200 fines had been issued under false authority. The board voided every fine and issued refund checks. The management company was fired, and a new company was brought in with a clear, transparent contract. And Martha? She resigned from every committee and stopped showing up at meetings. A few neighbors reported seeing her moving boxes into a truck 2 weeks later. She sold her house and left the neighborhood for good. The kicker came a month later when the new management company reviewed the old towing records. Turns out the tow vendor's contract had also expired, and they had been towing on pure bluff for the last 5 months. The HOA filed a complaint with the state, and the tow company lost their operating license. The funny part? Martha had insisted it was a fire lane issue, and when the county came out to inspect, they confirmed that the actual curb markings in city ordinance proved she was wrong. There was no fire lane. There never had been. She had invented the whole thing. I got a formal apology letter from the board, a refund check for the filing fees, and a promise that enforcement policies would be completely rewritten with input from homeowners. And every time I pull into my driveway now, tires over the apron edge, I think about that moment when I handed Martha the expired contract and watched her world fall apart. It was worth every sleepless night, every tow threat, every bogus fine. Because in the end, the truth won. And Martha lost everything. Until next time, take care.